Hi everyone, I'm Teacher Luke, an expert Duolingo English Test teacher, and this is my second video on the writing for 50 words, or the writing about a topic question type. Like I said, this is my second video on this question type, so if you haven't seen my first one yet, I highly recommend you do so. You can click this card here. In the first video, I give you some simple tips on how to organize an answer, and then I show you a sample answer for an argumentative writing prompt. In this video, we're going to look at another one of the writing questions, the recount. So just in case you don't remember or you're new, let's take a look at the different styles of writing questions the Duolingo English Test asks you. So when you go to the Duolingo English Test website, you can find this information. It shows the types of writing they could ask you to do when you do the test. So there are three different styles. We have the describe, the recount, or the make an argument. The recount, which we'll talk about today, is all about talking about your own experiences. Like I said, in my first writing video, I gave an example answer of the argumentative writing, so how to make an argument paragraph. The link is in the description below. So yes, in this video, we're going to talk about the recount. I'm going to give you some quick tips on how to structure your recount answer, and then I'll show you a sample answer and we'll analyze it together. But before we start that, if you think this video is helpful for you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It really does help me a lot. So let's take a look at the scoring criteria first. This is really important to know because you need to know what you're being assessed on. That way you can tailor your studies to the criteria. So let's take a look at that now. So this writing criteria is the same for both of the writing tasks. This one, the 50 words writing, and also the describe an image writing task. The criteria is exactly the same, so let's check that quickly now. The first point is grammatical accuracy and complexity. Grammatical accuracy refers to the correctness of your sentences in terms of grammar when you're writing. So basically, are you able to write error-free sentences? And complexity refers to the type of grammar you're using. Are you just using simple sentences, or are you using a mixture of simple and complex sentences? This is what we mean by complexity. Next one, we have lexical sophistication and diversity. This simply refers to your vocabulary. So basically, are you using the correct words to represent your ideas, and are you using a mixture of vocabulary? It's important that you don't repeat the same words over and over again, because that is not diverse. You want to be able to show diversity through your vocabulary. The third point is task relevance. Basically, did you answer the question? So I see a lot of students when they do this writing task, they don't actually answer the question. Instead, they write something loosely related to the topic, but it doesn't really answer the question. If you do that, you will lose points for task relevance. Next one is length. So of course, for this task, you need to write at least 50 words. However, I recommend that you try to write more, probably around 100 to 150 words. And lastly, we have fluency. In writing, fluency is also known as cohesion. Do your ideas link smoothly? And does your paragraph as a whole look like one solid paragraph rather than a mixture of individual sentences? This is what we mean by fluency in writing. Okay, so that's the criteria for the writing assignments on the Duolingo English Test. There is a lot to consider here. However, I think it's quite fair because in order to be able to write a good paragraph in English, you need to be able to do all of those things very well. And it's also the same criteria on the IELTS and TOEFL exam. So it really does test your English writing skills fully. Okay, so now let's take a look at how you can organize your recount paragraph. So very similar to the argumentative style, your paragraph should include these three important things: a topic sentence, supporting sentences, and of course you need a concluding sentence. So basically, every type of academic or formal paragraph you write in English should include the same elements: topic sentence, supporting sentences, and a concluding sentence. This is pretty standard and usually mandatory for formal styles of writing, like you will do in this Duolingo English test. But what is a topic sentence? How can you write supporting sentences? And also, how can you do a concluding sentence? Let's now take a look at an example from the Duolingo practice test. I'll show you how I planned my answer, and then I'll show you how I actually wrote my answer out, and we can analyze that together. So let's take a look at that now. So this is one of the recount questions on the Duolingo English practice test, and it goes like this. Films can tell us a lot about the country where they were made. What have you learned about another country from watching its movies? So right away you can tell that this is a recount because it's asking you to talk about your own experiences. In this case, your own experience watching foreign movies and what you've learned about a country from those movies. It's not asking you to describe the movies, and it's not asking you to make an argument for or against the movies. It's just asking you to talk about your experience. So let me show you how I planned my answer for this question type. Okay, so first things first, right away I realized that this question is asking me about my own experience, so I have to write about my experience. Okay, so of course on the Duolingo English test, we only have 5 minutes to do this, so for planning, you need to start thinking quickly. So I know it's about my own experience, and now I have to pick a country I want to talk about. So I'll choose Korea because I've watched a lot of Korean movies, and I think I've learned a lot about Korean culture from those movies. I want to try to think of at least 2 things I've learned. Because you have to write over 50 words, and writing 50 words about one idea might be a bit tricky. Okay, so quickly 2 things. Okay, I learned about Korean eating culture, and I also learned a lot about Korean language from the movies. Okay, next point. Very quickly, do I have some examples to back up my ideas? Yes, I do. I can think of some examples, so that's good. And then lastly, I have to think about my structure. So how am I going to organize my paragraph? So just like we talked about, I'm going to start with a topic sentence, and then I'm going to write 2 supporting ideas with supporting sentences, and lastly, a concluding sentence. Okay, so I've done the planning in my head. So remember, on the Duolingo English test, we only have 5 minutes to do this writing task, so you've got to do this really quickly. I recommend you spend about 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds planning, but no more than that. If you spend more time than that, then you won't have time to actually write out your whole answer. And remember, when you do your planning, it's got to be in your head. Don't say your answers out loud because that's against the Duolingo test rules, and definitely don't write them down on a piece of paper. That's for sure against the rules. So you have to do all the planning in your head. Okay, so my planning's done. Let me now show you my answer. So this was my first sentence. I am particularly fond of Korean movies, and I have learned so many aspects of Korean culture from watching its movies. This is what we call a topic sentence. The topic sentence here kind of paraphrases the question and indicates what I'm going to write about next, which is what I have learned myself from Korean movies. So this would be a good topic sentence for a recount paragraph. Then I'll move on to my supporting idea number 1, which is one of the most interesting things that I have learned is about Korean eating customs. When dining in Korea, it's commonplace to share food. So this is my supporting idea 1. This is directly related to the topic sentence because it talks about one thing I have learned about Korea from watching Korean movies. It's also important to include transition phrases when you're jumping from topic sentence to supporting sentence 1. My transition phrase here was one of the most interesting things that I've learned. This transition phrase indicates to the reader that I'm now going to talk about my supporting ideas. And of course, I will add an example to this idea to back it up. You want to include examples whenever you can. So I use the phrase, for example. This is a simple one you can use when you're going to talk about an example. So, for example, at a restaurant, Koreans usually order a large amount of food that is shared among all guests, rather than each person ordering their own dish, which is typical in Western countries. So the sentence in green is the example which backs up my supporting idea number 1. And at the end, I wrapped up my supporting idea number 1 with kind of a summarized sentence. Eating the Korean way means eating from the same bowl, since sharing is a big part of their culture. And this is enough for one idea. Remember, in the Duolingo English test, you only have 5 minutes, so you can't be writing lots and lots of examples. Instead, I recommend that you write one idea, provide one example, and then wrap up your idea with a summarizing sentence. After you finish supporting idea number 1, you should move on to supporting idea number 2. My example answer goes like this. Another useful thing I have learned is the Korean language. Again, I used a signal phrase here. Another useful thing I have learned. This signals to the reader that I'm moving on to a new idea. And of course, just like in supporting idea number 1, I provide an example. Even though I am studying Korean at a college, watching Korean movies has taught me a lot of spoken idioms and slang expressions that do not appear in textbooks. This is an example. And I used a contrasting sentence structure, even though. So I'm contrasting studying Korean at a college and studying through Korean movies and what I have learned differently from those movies, which were spoken idioms and slang expressions. And just like in my supporting idea number 1, I wrapped up this idea with a summary of sorts. In this case, it was a result. This has helped me to expand my knowledge of spoken Korean and made me sound more fluent. Of course, I could write a lot more here if I had more time, but I only have 5 minutes and I think this is enough for the Duolingo English test. Lastly, it is important to write a concluding sentence. Mine is, to sum up, from my experience, watching foreign movies can be a fantastic source of education as well as entertainment. And the same as all the other sections, I include a transition word here to show that I'm going to conclude my paragraph. I used to sum up, which of course is a concluding transition phrase. It shows the reader that I'm about to write my conclusion. So it's important to include these transition phrases. Here's the example in full. It's a bit small on this screen, I know, but I will write it in the description below and you can read it from there. The word count for this was 175 words. A lot of students ask me whether they should write their answer as one full paragraph, like I have here, or separate it into small paragraphs. So this is a really common question I get asked, and to be honest, I don't think it's very important whether you write it as one paragraph or as separate smaller paragraphs. I think the important thing is that you follow the criteria that the Duolingo English test team set for us. Remember, grammatical accuracy and complexity, lexical sophistication and diversity, task relevance, length, and fluency. I think those are much more important things to be concerned about. However, if you want my opinion, only my opinion, I think writing as one paragraph is a bit better. Because you only have 5 minutes, and usually when you only have 5 minutes to do a writing task, you're only expected to write one paragraph. And that's it for this video. I hope this was helpful. Remember, my full answer is below in the description, so definitely go and read and study that. And that's it. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end, and I'll see you next time. Bye.